Welcome to the Waiting Warriors podcast. As loved ones of first responders and military personnel, we often face life situations and challenges that many others don't experience. And while each of us and our experiences are unique, together we can learn from one another and become stronger in this journey of life. Now let's step out of mediocrity. It's time to thrive. Hi guys, welcome to the Waiting Warriors. This is Michelle Bowler, your host. Today we have a special guest, Bernadette Soler. Hi Bernadette, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me and for hosting the podcast and just for everything you do for this community.
Oh, thank you. It is my pleasure. I say it all the time, but I feel like I'm cheating. I get so much out of this podcast. Like it started out as a way to serve, and then it's like, well, if nobody gets anything out of it, I get something. So it's good. It's good, but it's fun. I love this community that we're building. But
Absolutely.
Let's get to you. So Bernadette her husband is a U.S. Marine currently doing operations at a recruiting station. We've never done that. That's got to be like an interesting.
It's so different.
So different. But he's been active for 4 years and then 2 years prior in the reserves. And then you are a yoga teacher and you run a wellness, lifestyle, and athleisure company. That word always gets so funny. Athleisure.
Athleisure. I know it doesn't really have a definition online either. It's kind of a weird one.
But that's so fun. So is there anything else you want to do we need to know about you? I mean, I'm sure.
Yeah, so I'll just introduce myself a little bit. My name is Bernadette. I've been teaching yoga for 7 years, so way before I married my Marine, and we lived as civilians for like 4 or 5 years after college. And so I think our transition into being a military family was difficult because it was just so different than everything we'd experienced. But my journey has been really interesting as I've worked on transitioning into the military as a spouse and meanwhile advancing my yoga training and stuff like that, and sort of how that has all pieced together in my life. So,
and let's get to your story, because we're going to talk with Bernadette today. She like has a story and a journey with self-care, which you might think is interesting because she's been teaching yoga for 7 years, right? That's what you. So 7 years, you would think, as we often do, we see these yoga teachers and they are just zen and put together, and like yoga is kind of one of the ultimate self-care things. So you would think that a yoga teacher has it all together, but your story is so interesting. So let's kind of get into it. You were a yoga teacher before service started, and then you got thrown into this military life. What was that like? Was it smooth?
So it was really interesting. So when he first got stationed down at Camp Lejeune, I decided to move down there before we got married and stuff. So we were just still dating, and I had been working in corporate America for 4 years and teaching yoga as sort of a side gig. And I was like, well, I know I'm going to marry this guy anyway, so I'm just going to go do the yoga thing. And so I moved and, just started teaching for full time. And I think, and then within our first year of living down there, we got engaged and married. And then immediately after that, he started working up for a deployment, and then he deployed, and then we had our transition back home. And then almost immediately after he got home, we had very quick orders up to Maryland. So really within 2.5 years, I had almost every single thing in my life changed. So I had a big move. I had a complete career change where I went from corporate America, very secure and totally different than being a full-time yoga teacher. And I started my company, and in the meantime, I was planning our wedding, and we got married and trying to figure out the newlywed thing. And I was trying to figure out the military spouse thing. And then it was like deployment and PCS right away. So I don't think I'm alone in this, but it felt like a total whirlwind. And it was like, wow, everything in my life just changed and then changed again and then changed again. So it's a really interesting transition for me.
Yeah. And what's interesting is it's been interesting hearing people's stories and going through our military life with the background that my husband has, because he got his bachelor's in marriage and family, and then his master's is in military chaplaincy. So he had a whole bunch of psychology, counseling type things, and it's so interesting because there are certain life stressors that will trigger stress and chaos and anxiety and self-doubt and depression and all these feelings. And typically, in a normal civilian type life, in a normal life, you get one, maybe two of those life stressors at a time.
Right.
But you just listed like 3 or 4, and that happens to us all the time in military and first responder life. Like we get hit with the life stressors that all the psychiatrists and the other ologists, all those
psychologists,
all those ologists and counselors, they all know when somebody comes in their office dealing with this, it's like, okay, this is why, and this is normal for you to be feeling like this, but we don't realize it in the military that we're dealing with it amplified.
Absolutely.
And it's just so interesting to me. I just had to point that out. Like, we feel so alone.
Yes.
But we all go through it in just these big old chunks. So you've had all of these life stressors happen in a rapid period of time. Like 2 years may seem fast, but at the same time, like that's not a long time to process or to kind of become like
adapt.
Yeah, adapt to it. So where did you kind of find yourself? Did you find yourself in your lovely yoga, Zen place that you want to be and you should be, or where did you kind of find yourself?
So it was really interesting for me because while all this stuff was going on, and especially while my husband was on his deployment, I was going through an advanced yoga teacher training. And I think when we think about yoga, we think a lot about the postures and stuff like that. And what we were learning along the way was also the breathing practices and the meditation and the mantras and really different tools of self-care and how to combine them all specifically to whatever season of life you're in. So whether that's what your age and your physical state or, what you're going through in your life just that month or that year. So what I started to realize, and part of our homework during this training was to design practices for ourselves to do based on what we were going through and how to support ourselves through that. So what ended up happening for me was, I used to be really interested in getting into a handstand or trying all these really cool deep back bends. And it started to transition into being more about, oh, how can I design a practice that helps me to nourish my heart when I'm lonely? And how can I design, so I was making these little practices for myself and doing them, and they were really working. And it started to just overflow into the rest of my life. So, I think with self-care, it's so easy when they're gone, when the husband or wife is gone, to not make yourself a full meal or not clean the house and just not really take care of yourself like you would if they were home. So I started making these little changes along the way as well of okay, I'm going to go from buying a package of corn dogs and eating that for a week to what if I made a crock pot meal and just did Tupperware? And it just started to be just because my husband's gone doesn't mean I don't deserve to be fully taken care of as I would take care of the two of us if he was here. So I started keeping the house really clean and I was consistent about food prepping and getting enough sleep and all that kind of stuff. And then I was doing my yoga practice that I was designing to really serve what I was going through. So if I was lonely or stressed out, it wasn't just doing the postures. I was adding in everything I needed to really serve myself throughout those different times. And I think my turning point, you kind of go through phases. Like once he gets home, it's like craziness again and stuff kind of drops off. But I think when it really, really struck me was during our first PCS. So he had gotten home a few months before, and we got orders to Maryland, and we were really excited about it, but we had never been to Maryland before, basically. We were trying to buy our first house, and we only had like 3 weeks or something to be able to buy a house. So we were doing these 12-hour day trips up and back to like look at 2 places and then come. It was crazy. And I had also picked up a part-time job during that time that just ended up being really stressful for me. So, and it was taking up a lot of time, and we were dealing with the PCS and everything else we had going on. And I was also teaching, so I had a lot going on. And so what ended up happening to me was I was holding a lot of stress in my neck at that time, and I wasn't, my self-care routine had really dropped off, and I ended up holding so much tension in my neck that my right arm went numb, and the right side of my face went numb. Ooh. From the tension I was holding in my neck. So I had to take a really hard look at, okay, get back into your routine. I designed a really short yoga practice for myself with a mantra that was like, helping me to be at ease, and just a little bit of stuff to work out my neck to help that. And then, of course, I ended up having to go to massage therapists and all kinds of other stuff because I was sort of having an emergency stress reaction situation. But I really turned to the yoga during that time, and I was like, okay, I have this stuff. There's nothing worse than being the stressed out yoga teacher, right? Like, not a good look. And I was like, I'm going to commit to this every day and use the tools that I have. And it really, really served me. So I think one of my main messages that I want to share is, even if you feel like you don't have time, and even if you feel like, like you don't have money and time and the resources to do, there are little habits we can create to serve ourselves and manage our stress and keep ourselves in check. And it was at that point where I actually decided I was going to write this ebook for military spouses with yoga practices and sort of theme it towards the type of stuff that we go through, because I was like, I just feel so inspired to give this back because it has seriously served me. And it still does to this day. It's a habit for me now. So
yeah,
kind of
I think you bring up something so interesting, though, that I didn't realize until like more my adult life. But it's interesting how much stressors and life circumstances can amplify, and they can manifest themselves through your body will tell you that you're not handling it correctly. Do you know what I mean? Like with your neck, I know I've had stomach problems throughout my life, and I have a pretty good handle on it. But then when I'm stressed and things are going crazy, I feel sick again. And I've heard multiple times that this just happens. And it's so fascinating to me because I'm not like a super crunchy or like, I like yoga, but I don't meditate every day and all that kind of stuff. I think it's fascinating, but it's just not necessarily my language. But we can't argue with the fact that your body feels the stress and your body experiences it in a very real way. And I love that you have this ebook, you have this program that we can find a way to kind of listen to our body and give it what it needs.
And you're absolutely right. Stress absolutely. And especially over time can manifest literally into chronic disease because
Yeah.
our body hears everything that we think and has little reactions to it. And then over time, it can just become a major issue. And like, I told you the story about my neck, but even before my husband joined the military, like I've always battled with stress. And I'm kind of the same as you. I had one thing a couple years ago, and then last year it was my neck. And so I think part of my journey too has been realizing like, okay, this is not our body's natural state. Our body is made to heal
Our
itself.
body doesn't want us to be miserable and in pain all the time, guys.
Yeah. Like, and so it really is like when we're in pain or when something feels wrong, it's our body saying, hey, like, you got to pay attention to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love that you said that and that resonates with you because it's absolutely like what I'm really realizing over the last couple of years and what I'm passionate about now. And I've worked on it so much with myself, and like it's my honor to help other people with that as well. So
Mm-hmm.
our natural state is not to be stressed out or in pain and miserable and anxious.
Yeah. Well, and I've said it a few times on Instagram, and just because this phrase has kind of come into mind and hit me really personally, and it's just that just because it's hard doesn't mean it has to be miserable.
Yes.
And I think that is very, very true in every sort of aspect of whether you're a mom when your husband is gone and you have little kids. Yes, that is hard, but we don't have to be miserable. There are things that we can do and implement in our lives intentionally to make life easier. But it's the same, like our body doesn't have to be physically miserable. There are things that we can be intentional and implement, which is what you have. So I wanna talk about your ebook. Is it more like an ebook or is it a program?
So it's an ebook, and it's basically like a PDF download, and it has 9 intentional yoga practices really intended and designed for military spouse and first responder spouses, and 1 breathing practice, which even if people just do the breathing practice, I mean, that has gotten me through like root canals and like all this stuff. I'm not kidding. And so after going through this whole experience and my journey over the last couple of years, I was like, man, this has worked so well for me. And, if there are other people that are open to taking care of themselves in this way, like I've studied it, I have the tools, and I want to give that back. So the practices are themed for like cultivating patience. There's one for practicing gratitude, which is really nice for any time, and especially if you're just feeling like the whole world is on your shoulders. There's one to do with your kids that's designed just to have fun with your kids and have a fun family time, especially if one of your loved ones is away. There's one to get grounded. So I wish I had had that practice when my husband was getting home, when I was sitting by myself in the kitchen, fully dressed to drive on base, and I still had like 2 hours, and I'm just sitting there in silence, like, what do I do now? So there's 9 different themes. One of them is for travel, to take care of your body and reduce stress during travel, because we do that a lot, and we move a lot. And I'm not going to be able to think of all 9 of them right now, but they're each themed for experiences that we go through as military spouses. One of them is for loneliness. There was a point in my husband's deployment where I just started to get really lonely, and I was like, man, no one ever hugs me, like, and so I was doing this yoga pose where it was like I was wrapping my arms around my shoulders in a pose. So I was like, I need a hug. I'm going to hug myself, and it's all about those little tiny things that can help to nourish ourselves in times that we really need it. And, taking really good care of ourselves in a way that really supports us throughout all of the different experiences that we have as military and first responder spouses.
Yeah. And I do want to say, because you kind of mentioned, like, for those who are open to it, you found yourself with this knowledge, so you wanted to present it to people who were open to it. Mm-hmm. I just have to say, guys, why not? That's something that I'm discovering. The longer I am a military spouse, I fought help for a long time. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where the Waiting Warriors started, is because I finally realized that there was no possible way that I could do this military life on my own, and like not including my husband, because he just can't be there as much as he wants to be. It's impossible with the job he has. And like, we can't do it on our own. And a lot of times that means building a community and having people around, which is good. And I totally agree with that. That's why we have the podcast, why I started this, so we could hear each other's stories and learn things from each other. But I also think it's like, you don't have to, I doubt that any one person has all the tools needed to be quote unquote successful, or what I would say is thriving. So it's like, why not, if you find yourself in a stressed position in life, or like something that Bernadette has said, like, I'm feeling lonely, I'm feeling stressed out, I'm not feeling grounded, like I'm feeling just sporadic, and like for me, it's like I feel like I'm a chicken running around egg pop or something, like, and I need to just kind of center and ground yourself, like you just got to plant your feet on the ground. If any of that sounds like you, like, why not just try this resource? Like, what's the worst that could happen? The worst that can happen is it for some reason doesn't click, but like it will help in a little bit. So why not try? Like, we don't have to be stubborn and think that we have to muscle our way through it. I think one of my grandpas would always say, and my parents always said it to us growing up, like, work smarter, not harder. You know, like, we are strong. We are 100%. We are strong, but we can also be smart about it. And that's why I love having you on. I love that you have this resource that just gives us one more tool, one more thing to be purposeful and intentional with.
And I think I loved how you said it a moment ago, where there's so much out there. Like, there's yoga, and there's meditation apps, and there's, inspiring books to read. And I think a big part of self-care for me, and stress reduction and stress management, has just been finding the different things that work for me and doing that. Like, sometimes you just have to try a couple of things.
Yeah.
And see what works. And sometimes if you don't like it, then leave it. And it's like, you'll find different things, or maybe combinations of things that work for you. And then that's what you stick with and create a habit out of it.
Right. And which is so funny, because I just wrote this article for a military website. By the time this is published, it will be published. So if you're on Instagram, you'll have heard about it. It's like militarywithkids.com or something. And she wanted me to talk about how I thrive during separation. And one of them has been that I figured out what fills my bucket. What's my self-care. And I think we've talked about this a few times with different interviews, but like, just try different things. Because for me, I realized that the whole like bath bomb, bubble bath, and binging on Netflix, like, that's fun, but it doesn't fill me. Like, it's not actually taking care of me, except for when I'm pregnant. Then it's like, yes, give me that.
All the best.
All the best. Just like, let me stand in water 24/7. But it's, for some people, that bath is the time to just relax, and then they get out and they are like ready to take on the world. For me, it's not. Like, that's not it. But then for me, if I go out to my front yard and I get my hands dirty in the dirt and I rip out a
Mm,
bush and then I plant some really pretty flowers and then a week later I weed and then I drive my van up into my yard and like my yard is looking all pretty, then it's like, oh, I feel so good. But there are so many things. There's gardening, yoga, there's books, meditation, and there are all different kinds. Like we just have to try things.
yes,
So again, I'm just going to say, why
absolutely.
not? Why not try a simple, easy ebook
Hmm.
if it will help?
The thing that's cool about it too is for every practice, I include like an intention and a mantra and then the practice. And so it's like, my goal is if spouses have this, and even if they don't have time to do the yoga, they can go look at the mantra and then
Mhm.
carry that with them throughout their day and just think about it.
Yeah.
And so it's just, it's just another way to go about your day a little bit more intentionally and a little bit more, like you said, just another way to fill your cup. And I think as spouses, we focus so much on making sure our husbands and wives are okay and taking
Mhm.
care of the kids and taking care of our communities. And I think if we fill our own cup, all that's going to do is overflow onto everybody.
Mhm.
And so, I think that's a really important thing is just taking care of ourselves and showing up for ourselves. And then, we'll always be able to show up for the people that we care about.
Yeah, I totally agree. So, where can people find this ebook? How do they
Yeah.
how do they connect with you and get a hold of that?
So the ebook, it's called At Ease, Ancient Yoga Tools for Modern Military Spouses. And you can find it at www.ateasebook.com. And there's actually a free preview of the book on there. So if anyone wants to download the preview and just check it out, you can go there. And my contact information and stuff is on there. So if anyone ever has any questions, like you're welcome to just reach out to me. But that's where you can find the book.
Mhm. And then
And
you're on Instagram, right? Your doll.
Doll
What is
Yoga Wear on
Okay.
Instagram. So I'm working on a little bit of rebranding because I have a couple different sort of business projects going on right now. But so I'm on Instagram under my athleisure company, which is Doll Yoga Wear, and I talk about the
Mhm.
book on there too. So that's where you
Okay.
can find me on Instagram.
And we'll put all those links in the show links. So for those of you who don't want to remember it, I guess you can
Yeah.
just click on the phone.
Awesome. And I would love for all of your listeners to offer 20% off. So I'll just set up a code that's Waiting Warriors. And if anyone wants to go check it out, I'll give you guys a little coupon there. So we'll put that in the links as well.
Oh, thank you. That's awesome, guys. See, really
Absolutely.
now it's like, why not try it? Just why not? If you're worried about money, you're worth the money. If you're worried about the time, you can do 10 minutes a day.
Yes.
Trust me. I know, like, you can do 10 minutes a day.
You can
That's
do
what
it, guys.
you can do. Well, thank you, Bernadette, so much. Oh, our last question. I can't believe I almost forgot. I've
Oh,
never
my
almost
word.
forgotten before. I'm so sorry. What is your key to thriving that you want to share with your fellow waiting warriors?
Yes. So my key to thriving is being consistent and forming my self-care into repeatable habits. So just making it part of my routine. And so if I don't think I'm going to have enough time to do 45 minutes of yoga a day, then I create a 5-minute yoga practice. And I just create little habits like food prepping and getting enough sleep, giving myself a bedtime. And that is how I really stay balanced. And I think consistency is key, and it's the little tiny actions in our lives that make up our whole life. So the more little things you can do along the way, that is what I found at least works for me, is just
Yeah.
be consistent with little things.
Yeah. Okay. Two things. First
Yeah.
of all, I love that you bring up like you have a 5-minute yoga routine that you can do if you don't have the full 45 minutes. That's really smart
Hmm.
because often we think it's like an all or nothing,
Yes.
especially with exercise or yoga. The other thing I'm curious, with giving yourself a bedtime, do you have a time or do you just kind of say, I'm going to go to bed early?
I have a time. I'm the type of girl,
Smart.
especially if my husband is gone, I will be up till 2 a.m. working or reading or watching like Oprah videos on YouTube. And I'm like, and I feel so physically ill the next
Yeah.
day. So I go to bed at 10. I had to put my foot down. And I need a lot of sleep. So I go to bed at 10. If you're the type of person that doesn't need like the full 8 hours or anything like that, then, I don't think it's necessarily a specific time. But I got to the point where I was like, I can't just not sleep anytime my husband is gone.
Yeah.
So I go to bed at 10.
That's so smart. Because I always try to say, like, no, I'm going to go to bed early, all that kind of stuff. But then it's like, one, it's hard to fall asleep when he's gone.
Yeah.
It's like weird and the creaky noises.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But thinking about it, when you said that, I was like, wait, but am I just hearing those creaky noises because I'm up just working or reading a book, or just because I'm not as tired, or I think I'm not as tired, or I think it's just all in our heads. I love that you set yourself a bedtime. That's
Yeah, it's like, because otherwise I'll be up until the wee hours and then feel horrible the next day. Like it really affects my body. So that was one of my one of my big lessons on deployment.
Which of course just amplifies the problem of a deployment and all the things that can happen during that.
And yeah, and it contributed to my stress, honestly, because my body felt worse and I was more anxious. Like your body heals overnight, while we're sleeping. So that was major for me, bedtime.
That's awesome. I'm gonna do that one.
Yes. Let me know how it works out.
Yeah, we have a bedtime for everybody else in the family.
Yeah.
Smart.
Those routines.
We love it. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Guys, go check out the ebook. Don't forget to use the code Waiting Warriors. We'll put that all in the show notes. And thank you so much. This was awesome.
It was so fun meeting you.
You too. Okay, all you Waiting Warriors out there, you guys have a great week.
Hey everyone, I have a favor to ask. If you have enjoyed this podcast, can you leave a review and subscribe? I promise it just takes a second and that will help more people find this podcast. Also, I'd love for you to join us in our Facebook group. Just go to facebook.com/thewaitingwarrior, click groups, and then The Waiting Warriors. Until next time, have an awesome day.